All right, so this is chapter 5, microbiology basics. So the main thing that I want you to remember from this lecture that it is really all about learning about diseases, infections, and what causes those. So microorganisms, fungi, protozoa, and so forth. Okay, so it kind of ties in more to ours than just learning straight microorganisms, microbiology. Disease itself is defined as the failure of the body to function normally. So these can be genetic. These can be congenital. What does congenital mean? If it's a congenital disease.
Later on in life.
No, opposite what? Yeah, right in the beginning. So at birth, you're born with it is what congenital means. So if you have a congenital disease, say you had a heart disease problem that you were born with, that would be considered congenital. What's really funny is congenital and genetic kind of run into each other a little bit because a lot of times it is genetic that caused the congenital disease. Okay, if you're born with it. It was nothing like, it wasn't obesity induced. It wasn't, all right, so let's go there. Cian, everyone knows because she's public about it, that she has a blood sugar problem. Okay, is it type 1 or type 2? Type 1. So that is congenital, honestly. She just didn't find out until later because she was technically born with it. It wasn't induced by obesity or it wasn't induced by that. Okay? So type 1 is congenital. You're born with it. There's nothing you can do to prevent it from happening and so forth. All right? There's also age-related diseases related to nutritional deficiencies like anemia, obesity, trauma, and environmental toxins. So like it used to be like asbestos could cause some diseases, organ failure, and then inflammations, or an example of that would be arthritis. The thing that causes diseases are pathogens, path being disease and so forth. So these are disease-producing microorganisms, and that's really what we're going to concentrate on today. So they include bacteria, viruses, fungi, protozoa, worms, and arthropods. So that's going to be pretty much the rest of the lecture from here on out. Infection itself is defined as an invasion of the body by a pathogen. So by one of those things, whether it's tapeworms or whether it is MRSA or MRSA. So there's two different types of infections though, and you need to know the difference. A localized infection, think about like a little spot, you know, that you have redness on your skin, but it's getting a little red, it's getting a little white. A localized infection is just one certain area. A systemic infection, they're a lot more detrimental. The infection spreads a lot of times throughout your blood and throughout your entire body, and you are very, very sick with a systemic infection. Okay, very, very sick. And this is what people that die of infection, this is really what they have, like sepsis or just overall sickness. So these are some key terms here at the beginning. I'm not going to go through and define every single one. Antibiotics, I think you probably know what they are. Communicable disease, this is any disease that's spread from a host to another. Epidemic, a disease acquired by many people, so like the flu, so forth. Epidemiology, the study of. Incubation period, normal flora. We're going to go in more to that as we go on. A nosocomial infection. This one's important for you to know. This is hospital acquired. So this could also mean vet hospital acquired, whatever facility acquired. So the patient didn't get it until they either had surgery there, they were there as an inpatient for something else. They got the infection from being there. Okay. Reservoir of infection, we're going to be talking about that a little bit more. Resistance, so a lot of us are resistant to antibiotics because of over the years of being put on them. Sterilization, and then a vector as well. So the different types of pathogens, this is what we're going to be looking at the rest of the time on this lecture. So there's bacteria, viruses, fungi, protozoa, worms, and arthropods. So this picture just kind of puts a picture with the words and the different groups of things going on here. Bacteria, we're going to start off here at the beginning. They are single-cell organisms. Bacteria sounds bad, doesn't it? It is bad. It's what we think about when we think about germs, okay? But bacteria have a cell wall. Okay? Not just like a cell membrane like human cells, but they have a cell wall. So an example here, so if a patient with a bacteria infection is given penicillin, which is abbreviated PCN, you guys, it prevents the cell wall synthesis in bacteria causing cell wall to burst. So penicillin treats bacteria and it can cause that cell wall to burst. So it's a good thing that penicillin works. Bacteria, they form spores to survive in very harsh environments, so they can really make it through a lot, such as drying, heating, and exposure to certain disinfectants as well. They can also lay in a dormant state. And a dormant state means like they're just still laying there. They may not be actively working at the time, but then later on they're just up and working. So they're in like that sleepy state or dormant state. One example of the dormant state is going to be the Clostridium botulism. And this kind of has to do with food poisoning, can withstand several hours of boiling water. I mean, when you think about boiling water, you're thinking about sterilizing something, right? But this botulism, it can actually withstand several hours of it boiling, so extreme heats. Back to normal flora here. This really has to do with bacteria because what normal flora is, it's a good bacteria you have. You guys ever been on antibiotics and doctor's like, hey, you need to take some probiotics, okay? They're trying to get that normal flora back in your body, okay? Prebiotics, probiotics, any of that stuff, okay? Because, yeah, antibiotics give you yeast infections because it's taking away your normal flora, okay? It's also taking your normal flora not only in the vaginal area, but also in the stomach, in the intestinal lining, and so forth. So some people, that's why it makes them sick to their stomach, and so forth. So normal flora are organisms that harmoniously live in the body without causing disease. They're actually good, healthy for you. Okay? Pathogenic bacteria can cause damage by entering and growing within the human cells. Bad deal there. And then they release these toxins that end up damaging the cells. And damaged cells can really turn into more serious things like cancer and so forth. All right, still talking about bacteria here as one of the microorganisms. There are 3 different shapes of groups of bacteria. They're going to be the cocci, which are the round bacteria, bacilli, which are the rod-shaped, and then the curved rods that are the vibrias. The curved rods look more like a corkscrew. Okay, think about those pasta noodles or rotino noodles that look like a corkscrew. That's what this one's going to look like. Of course, these bacteria are super, super small. We can't see them with a blind eye. This is underneath the microscope and so forth. An example of a round cocci would be like gonorrhea, meningitis, and pneumonia. The rod shape is going to be things like more serious ones, tetanus, diphtheria, tuberculosis. Curved rods are going to look more like this corkscrew, the Spirochetes. This is really uncommon, and syphilis as well. The rickettsial and chlamydia, they are also classified under the bacteria sector, but more specific. So this is going to be that microscopic view here. Do you guys know why do you really think that every time you took a sample from somebody's skin or wherever, okay? You took a sample by rubbing a Q-tip in that area, okay? And then you put it in the lab. Well, when they go to put stuff in a microscope or lab, they have to do what's called staining of it so that we get these certain colors, okay? So we're going to be learning about that and so forth, but that's why you get certain colors. What? Oh, cool, in the lab. Cool, so you got to see that in shadowing last year with Miss Evans' class. Perfect. So the first example here of the staining and the microscopic view is gonorrhea. The next one down underneath it is strep. Pretty easy to see that one. Staph, bacillus there, and then curved rods. I feel like the curved rods one may be computer generated there, but the rest of them are definitely true. I mean, the curved rods, I don't know that it's that clear normally underneath the microscope. Excuse me. Gonorrhea, which is also called clap, I'm not sure if you guys know that. Gonorrhea and chlamydia are very, very common. We're very familiar with Pike, Lincoln counties and so forth, and just everywhere, not just in Missouri and so forth, that gonorrhea and chlamydia are very common and treatable. But with this comes yellow discharge, painful urination. But these two can be found in the mouth, the reproductive organs, the urethra, the rectum, and the cervix, okay? And that is going to be this first picture here. But also syphilis, okay? Syphilis is going to be sores and rashes on soles of feet and hands, flat warts on the vulva. But there can also be this late-stage syphilis if you don't get it taken care of that is very serious, okay? Late-stage syphilis is very serious illness. It can cause heart problems, neurological problems, that's brain problems, tumors, and can lead to major brain damage. It can also cause blindness, paralysis, and even death. The genital sores caused by syphilis are also the reason why it makes it easier to become infected and then also to transmit HIV. So the picture on the right there, is that syphilis kind of showing up on the face and so forth. This is a video here. It's showing a staph infection, which is also a phase of impetigo. I'm not going to play this video, but just know that staph infections are very, very common, okay? I don't want you to take it with a grain of salt, but all of you all right now, and myself included, we all have staph sloughing off our skin right now, right? The staph infection or virus. Right? We all do. And so that kind of goes into MRSA here, which stands for methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. I know, and it's aureus, A-U-R-E-A-S. You're going to be seeing MRSA for the rest of your life. I don't care if you're in animals or humans here, because MRSA and staph cross over in between animals and humans. Right?
Staph infection from a spider bite.
Yeah, staph. Who knows? You know? Yeah, staph infection from spider bite. Guess what that actually came from? From the staph that was on your skin, it was on your skin, but the spider bite opened it up. Okay, the spider. I don't know that spiders spread staph. Now, like dogs, cats could, but I'm not sure about spiders. I could be wrong in that one, but probably more than likely, because I told you that we're all sloughing off staph basically all the time. Probably more than likely, it just so happened that you had the open spot, so you had a portal of entry, and then your skin's up, then it's there. Okay. So also, you guys probably might be familiar with any sports teams. I bet at least one sports team from each school a year has some type of problem. You might not hear about it, and that's okay. Has some type of staph infection they're spreading all amongst themselves. Okay. There's ways, of helping prevent that and so forth, with hand washing being number one. And so forth, and washing clothes and stuff like that. But it just creates more of a friendly environment. Okay, does that make sense? So staph is everywhere. MRSA is bad. Our patients will have it, and they will be on like contact precautions and stuff like that in their rooms. But it's somewhat treatable once you get to MRSA, that methicillin resistant. But what that means is methicillin is a type of medication that it's resistant to that, which is a pretty serious penicillin, okay? But because we have taken antibiotics our whole life and maybe a little bit too much, okay, then our bodies have become resistant to these superbugs, which MRSA is one of them, or MRSA. So our bodies are just become resistant. So they kind of have to use the big guns when you're infected. Big guns, what I mean by that is like the vancomycin, some different antibiotics that are higher up in classes and stuff like that. So the other big kicker with MRSA is, because we probably all have it if we swabbed our nose, honestly. The other big kicker, though, is if you get it on a piece of hardware in your body. So say you have a knee replacement, okay? So I don't know if you know that, but they put in an artificial knee when they do that. Okay, so if they do a back surgery and they put in a piece of artificial hardware, something like that is what I'm talking about. So say you have a knee replacement and they're doing a knee replacement. They're replacing it with a fake or artificial one, okay? Plastic, metal, whatever they are. They're pretty good steel, I think is what they are. Anyways, so if MRSA gets in during that surgery and then they close you back up, if it touches the hardware at all, it will never get off, even with the big guns, okay? So if they figure out that you're not healing from that surgery, you're having lots of signs of infection, then they might go back in and actually have to replace that whole new hardware over again, because that it will not get off of hardware, not even with any major medications and so forth. Moving on here to rickettsia and chlamydia, which is an STD again. These are going to be considered more parasites. But smaller. So parasites themselves are classified with bacteria, but they're just even smaller than bacteria. The deal with these is these reproduce within living cells. Rickettsia itself is parasites that are carried by fleas, ticks, and lice. Rocky Mountain spotted fever is by a tick. It's going to be an example of that, carried by a tick. Where chlamydia is smaller, very, very treatable, okay, than rickettsia, but it causes the STD and responsible also for trichomonia, which is a serious eye infection that can lead to blindness. So chlamydia does need to be treated because it can spread and create blindness in patients. This video, even if it does work, I'm not going to show it to you. It's just really dry, honestly. It's about Rocky Mountain spotted fever. So any of you guys know any patients with Rocky Mountain spotted fever? Of course, there's a big deer population that has it because of ticks. Also comes Lyme's disease with a tick as well. A big problem that we're encountering in healthcare right now is that any patient that ends up with Lyme disease, not all, but some of them end up having this huge allergy to beef and pork. Have you guys heard this? So we have all this like increasing population of allergy to beef and pork all of a sudden, and just trying to figure out why. And it kind of comes through this Lyme disease and so forth, and Rocky Mountain spotted fever and so forth. So viruses. So we talked about bacteria first, then we're going to move on here to viruses. Viruses are going to be the smallest pathogens. Okay, they're either formed of RNA or DNA, and they are surrounded by a protein shell. They reproduce within the living cells, so they are parasites as well. Examples of viruses, oh my gosh, there's so many. This is just a very short list. But measles, mumps, influenza, poliomyelitis, AIDS, I could just keep going on and on. You guys can think of viruses yourself, right? They are very difficult to kill without damaging the host cells. And so it does not, since it does not have a cell wall, the viruses, so penicillin does absolutely nothing for a virus. For years and years and years, but way back when I was younger, okay, my hometown doctor, every time anybody walked in with sniffles, he gave them antibiotic, okay, he gave them amoxicillin, okay. You guys probably know about amoxicillin, you probably all had it in your life, okay, even if you don't remember, you probably had it, I'll be honest with you. But when I was a child, everybody that came in the door with a sniffle even got amoxicillin. But we realized quickly that it was like, oh, that amoxicillin fixed me. Well, no, it doesn't treat a virus at all. And so now when we go to urgent care's walk-ins or our doctor and we're sick and they're like, they didn't give us any medication, well, it's because they figured out it was a virus. And no antibiotics really work for these viruses. And so they were, for years, they were just prescribing. But what's happening, they're like, well, it helped me. No, what happened is a virus, you gotta have to just write it out. You have to take the fever. You can decrease it with fever reducers, but they were just actually getting better about the same time that the antibiotics were kicking in, or not really. Does that make sense? And so people are like, well, the antibiotics made me better. So really it wasn't the antibiotics, it's just that you wrote out the time for the virus to go through your body. So this is a video here on shingles or herpes varicella zoster, which is, shingles starts off kind of like, it's the same virus as chickenpox. Okay? So you guys all receive a chickenpox vaccine now, but when I was a child, one person got chickenpox and they all like told us to come over and have a party, basically. And yeah, like our parents, they were like, oh no, bring your kid over here. My kid's got chickenpox. Oh yeah, everybody come over, put their kid in the same room so that we could all just get it over with. Right? So that's how it was handled. But now there's a chickenpox vaccine that you guys in your age group got as an infant before 1 year old, and that's helping quite a bit with that. But part of the same virus that you guys can get, I could still get, even though I had the chickenpox, is shingles. It's pretty typical that it comes later in life, 40s to 80s, honestly, when but they are vaccinating it at age 50 for the shingles virus. But the biggest patient complaints within this with shingles is actually pain. They are in extreme pain. It causes itchiness, but extreme pain. They look like dry patches of skin. Can you kind of see? I know it got a little bit dark. Raised there. They say that they're extremely painful. Extremely painful. Some of the patients are just hospitalized with shingles for pain. Otherwise, you don't go to the hospital for shingles. But sometimes if the pain is unreal, then you could. So we talked about bacteria. Then we talked about viruses. And next up is fungi. So fungi, think of plant-like organisms like mushrooms. They like it damp, moist. This also includes yeast and mold. But yeah, they grow best in dark, damp places, okay? Pathogenic fungi are going to be things like mycotic infections. Mycotic infections are usually localized, but some can be systemic. So examples of that are going to be like athlete's foot, ringworm, thrush, and then vaginitis. Candida albicans is the one that's responsible for that, and that is a yeast-like fungus that normally inhabits in the mouth, the digestive tract, and the vagina as well. When the candida overgrows, it can cause an infection in those areas. It can also cause intestinal symptoms or vaginitis. The systemic, when it goes systemic for whole body, fungal infections, they can be very rare. Okay, but if they occur, they are very life-threatening, and can cause, and becomes very, very difficult to cure and very, very hard. This picture here is going to be an example of ringworm. Then there's another one here close to the eye. And then athletes down at the bottom, and then thrush. Thrush is going to be in the mouth. Okay, it's like white patchy things. All these are fungus. Okay, all these are fungus. The big thing with fungus, yeast, and so forth, a big telltale sign if something is yeasty rash, is that if you look at this eye picture, and maybe a little bit of that ringworm up top. So visualize this. So you see a rash there, first of all. Okay, the ringworm, I know it looks a different color, not always, doesn't have to be that color, but what you should see there, the most important part that telling if it's a yeasty rash or not, or fungus, is that it's got just a small amount of bumps that are raised, okay? And it may just have one or two, and then they may get worse, though. So, like on this eye here, on the, not that real bad dark piece coming off the right side of the eye there, but right underneath, there's a patch there. It's like I can almost feel it, like a raised little bumps there, okay? And that's a pretty telltale sign in a diaper rash that's yeasty as well. Athlete's foot, ringworm as well, that it is a yeast or fungus infection, and so it needs to be treated with the antifungal. Next up, so we talked about bacteria, viruses, fungi, and next up is protozoa. So these protozoa, they are single-cell animal-like organisms. There's the amoebas, the ciliates, the flagellates, and the sporozoa. They're found mainly in the soil and water, most bodies of water. So this is why our beaches get shut down, you guys. Okay? You know, in Missouri, our beaches get shut down. It seems like about this time of year. I don't know if it's because the geese are just so prevalent. I don't know what goes on. Or the people just become so much. It's the end of summer, and just the protozoa go wild. Okay? The heat, so forth. So anyways, they're found in the soil and most bodies of water. And the big cause here is a lot of GI upset, diarrhea, this is in contaminated water. Okay. Also, another example is going to be malaria. Malaria is caused by a sporozoan, called Plasmodium, which is carried by a mosquito. Okay. It's spread over a wide region and still causes up to 3 million deaths per year. In this country, we don't have a lot of malaria because we have a lot of things that we take for granted, like not having to sleep outside every night. Okay? So in other countries, you know, they have to use things like, if they have them available to them, I know we ship a lot from this country, like mosquito netting to sleep with over their beds at night. So malaria is very, very serious. It is within the protozoan group. Also, there is this pneumocytitis and Cryptosporidium, which causes infections with patients with AIDS or other immunocompromised persons. You think of diarrhea maybe not being that bad, why would they shut down a beach? But not everyone thinks about that way. And so patients that are immunocompromised or anything or don't have a good immune system, that kind of stuff can really get them down. Next up is this parasitic worms. So this includes roundworms, tapeworms, pinworms, hookworms, and also this filariasis that causes elephantiasis, flatworms, and so much. Pinworms are going to be the most common in children. They come out in the nighttime and what the symptoms are, the patients, is that they have like a super itchy butt, okay? And what's happened is the pinworms come out of the anal area and come around that perianal area and cause all this itching. They're laying their eggs, okay? Then what happens, I know this sounds weird, but then they scratch that area out of natural, it's itching, right? And then for some reason, especially like infancy, they put a lot of fingers in the mouth, right? No purpose. But even after infancy, they do fingers to the mouth a lot. So then we're going that area, anus area to the mouth, not so good. So it's transferring, and it's an endless cycle, and they never get rid of these worms without treatment. With treatment, it's easily treated for pinworms and so forth. So usually parasitic worms are transmitted all over, or transmitted from the fecal-oral route. This is from feces to mouth, like I explained with the pinworms, or usually carried by hands. So this is going to be a good example of why in every place that you go to eat, that they say employees must wash their hands, right? Because if they don't, then they could spread it by preparing food. Yes?
I can't remember exactly who it was, but my grandma was telling me about how one of her friends when she was younger, they had the youngest child, and she always was playing with a cat who always had worms. And so it would spread
Yep,
And it got
that's
rid
it.
of it. It got rid of it.
Yeah, but probably everybody in the family had to drink it.
Everybody in the family had to drink it because this baby would spread it to every single person in the family, and
Yeah.
even the ones that didn't have it. But you had to drink your body weight. You know, like
Mhm.
it depended on your body weight. So the baby,
How much you had?
the baby had to pretty much drink little cups, but everybody else had to pretty much chug almost the entire bottle.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
It
That's
was really
absolutely true. So if someone in your family or a child gets pinworms, they have to treat the whole family. So the doctor sends home medication for the whole family. I mean, now they're using pills and other liquid medication for younger children, but they can use pills for adults and so forth. But yes, that's true. They have to treat the entire family.
She said that this friend's siblings still gets on to her about this to this day.
Really? Oh my gosh. I mean, I can't imagine. This would it's kind of like getting lice in your home. I have a friend that her child came home from daycare with pinworms, and she was just mortified. She's like, "Oh my God, I never even heard of this. I mean, we went to nursing school, blah, blah, blah." And she's the one who taught me all about this, you know, that you have to treat the family. And it was so interesting. But now every time I'm like, "Oh, my kid's scratching their butt. They got pinworms." I mean, so, you know, then you start to get paranoid about it too. But yeah, it really is a lot of work. It's kind of like lice, though. Like, you want to treat almost everybody in your house just because kind of thing. So, yeah. Flatworms themselves, including tapeworms, are the flukes. Tapeworms can live in the intestines and grow from 5 to 50 feet. 50 feet is quite a long ways, you guys. They can be really, really long in length. They feed on the human host, so weight loss is common, anemia. They invade the blood and liver and the lungs, and the intestines, of course. This is an example here, those tapeworms, and if we get to go to any vet offices and so forth, even for a field trip, they might have some pictures, or not pictures, some jars of tapeworms in their office because they think it's cool. Roundworm there in the eye, that's the most disgusting picture ever. Okay, that's a very serious case of roundworm. Then there's this elephantiasis down here in other countries that they struggle with, and that's also parasitic worms that somebody has in their body. And then lastly, that little pinworm down there in that intestine, that's going to be an example of those childlike worms I was just talking about, okay? That's what they look like. Moving on, okay? Moving on to one of the last groups here is the arthropods. These are animals with jointed legs and include insects. So this includes mites and lice and ectoparasites. Parasites themselves live on the surface of the body and the mucous membranes. The ectoparasites cause itching and discomfort, but they are not life-threatening. Other arthropods can act as a vector, so the example there would be mosquitoes biting flies, fleas, ticks act as that vector. So a vector itself is going to be the object, living or non-living, that transfers a pathogen from one organism to another. Oh, while I just saw Miss Montana, did you get a chance to?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. The bite of the arthropod vector includes pathogens into the host causing infection. So example there is mosquitoes carry that malaria. Okay. So a big thing they try to do in foreign countries and stuff that experience a lot of malaria, I just told you 3 million deaths a year. Okay. They try to do things to prevent the mosquito bites, right? Because that is their vector. Also, another example of a vector here is a tick carrying around the pathogens that cause Lyme disease, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and so forth. Identifying these pathogens. Okay, so we've talked about all these pathogens: bacteria, viruses, fungi, arthropods. I forgot one there. I don't know. Anyways, all these different groups. So we're going to talk about identifying them real quick. So I talked to you that in the lab they have to do this gram stain, okay, to try to identify them underneath the microscope. So depending on the color, like gram positives are purple or blue, gram negatives are pink or red. They use these different stains and so forth to diagnose, so then they can treat those problems. If you've ever heard the term that the lab's going to culture your strep test, that means that they're going to send it to the lab. They're going to grab one of those circles with the agar? Is that how you say it? I don't know. Anyways, the gel-like substance in a circle thing, they're going to swab your swab that they put down your throat across there, and they're going to grow it for 48 hours in a good warm environment, okay? So those are cultures. They check it like every 12 hours or so, check to see for any growth, and sometimes it takes that long before you can have a positive result, okay? So also another thing you can do is called a culture and sensitivity test. So you can actually test antibiotics in the lab is is this thing going to stop growing with this antibiotic? So you can get more specific in your treatment with that as well. So this is the circular thing here that I was talking about that's got the agar in it. This is showing you the stain that we do in the lab so that you can figure out which bacteria this is, or which microorganism, I should say more specifically, this is. This video here, it's not all that good either. The spread of infection. Spread of infection. So you have to have a portal of entry, which is where the pathogen enters. Some of them include the respiratory tract, which would be the lungs, breathing in inhaled droplets of water and dust. The gastrointestinal tract by eating spoiled food or contaminated hands in the mouth. To the GU tract, the eyes, the skin. The parenteral route, which includes like if something like a bite, cut, or surgery penetrates the skin. Those are a great way for pathogens to enter the body. Okay. This is the reason why we wear those gloves when we're exposed to any bodily fluids and blood. So we need a portal of entry. We also need a portal of exit. We need a place where it's going to live. It's kind of sound in the same spots. So think about respiratory tract. A place where it moves is going to be that sneeze or cough, putting it everywhere, right? But it's getting out of your body. The GI tract is going to be in the bowel movements mainly. The GU tract is going to be discharged like they come with STDs. Eyes could be tears. Breast milk could be a portal of exit. And then skin as well can spread things, or infection can get out that way as well. The most important way of preventing the spread of disease is going to be hand washing. So these are all the things kind of that we talked about here. The infection happens from a portal of entry, portal of exit. It could be a tiny animal to person, an environment to person, or a person to person. An example being that coughing or sneezing there. Pathogens, this is talking about that picture right there. The tiny animal would be like that mosquito, the tick, and so forth. The environment to person is the contaminated water, air, food. And then I told you person to person, that cough, that sneeze, but also contaminated hands are going to be the most important. That really talks about spread of infection, basically goes over what I just talked about, and I think that you guys already know that. So the next 6 slides here, these silly 6 journaling stories here, and I want to share. Oh, this is talking about this one's named Flora and her vaginal itch. This is antibiotic prescribed for a sinus infection, very, very common. Okay, well, this takes away that normal flora, so then it ends up causing another infection or vaginitis because the normal flora is gone and it allows overgrowth of other organisms. This is talking about, let's go to Typhoid Mary here. This is why Typhoid Mary needed to lose her gallbladder. Okay, she cook infected with salmonella unknowingly causes typhoid outbreak. So she was a cook. She infected a whole group of people actually with typhoid because of the salmonella poisoning. Okay. So the carrier here was the person or animal that shows no symptoms of the disease, so she didn't realize she was infected. That shows no symptoms, but harbors the infectious agent that the disease causes and transmits to other. The typhoid carries and harbors the S. typhi in the bile of the gallbladder, and the only way to end this carrier status is to get rid of the gallbladder. So there's a few more of these. This is the last 2. And so forth, but please, please, please just wash your hands, okay, and be clean. All right, any questions about the microorganisms? That is the end of chapter 5. The end of chapter 5, microbiology basics.